This is going to be such a treat. A couple of announcements. On Monday night, don't miss this, it's amazing. We are having a private tour. It's with another group that I kind of clomped on, said, can we join? And anyway, it's the Roots of Knowledge. We've been out there, we've talked about it. It's at the UVU library. And this is the artists, the creators, the husband and wife team, Tom and Gail Holdman. And they're going to go with us and tell us all about it. And it is spectacular. Parking is free after 5, so it is at the Holdman Library on UVU campus. And here is a little flyer over here that has all of the information. So that is this upcoming Monday, November 10th, 6:00 p.m. So, and this was the inaugural book when I happened to be there at the grand opening. So this has some of the pictures of what it's about, but it's the most spectacular stained glass presentation you could imagine. And then upcoming, just another one, so that's obviously independent, but I encourage you to go, is The Son of God Loves Pure Light, but it's the incredible Zenger nativities that you may have heard about, but it's going to be up in Midway at the Zenger's home. And it's a huge home, and they have probably the most incredible nativity collection in the world from all over the world. And it's free. And so there's various dates when it's going to be. So just kind of, we'll have flyers so that you can kind of say, hey, I want to just go and do it. But it is absolutely incredible. It's an informal, not sponsored by Elder Quest, not rides unless people get together individually and just go up. But encourage you to just go. We just want to make sure that you're aware of some of the amazing things around and encourage you to go see our wonderful world. And Brent will talk about, he has a little museum also, and you'll probably mention that, and maybe we'll get a flyer if you want visitors, but it's just a darling little museum of some of his incredible collection. With that, we are so thrilled to welcome Brent Ashworth. He is a longtime collector of the most amazing things that you could imagine. You're like, wow, I have just seen George Washington's wallet. I have seen Martha Washington's letter and signature. And Martha, there's very little from Martha because she burned all of her correspondence, all of her letters. She wanted to keep her life private. Whereas George Washington, every dot and tittle that he's ever written has been analyzed 1,000,000 times. And Abraham Lincoln and William Bradford's Bible, which came across the Mayflower and started our beautiful country with the whole thing that happened here. And William Bradford's my great-great-great-great-grandfather, 10 generations back, along with my husband, and along with about 40 million other people in America. But I'm very humbled to appreciate the Pilgrims. I grew up in Massachusetts, and we would go down to Plymouth and go see it, and the miracles that whole trip involved, including they only had about a 30-foot passageway through the water that they would have made it, was just amazing. And anyway, I turn the time over to Mr. Brent Ashworth, collector extraordinaire.
Well, it's a real honor to be here. I spoke with Elder Quest many years ago, but this is wonderful to be with you today. I've been a collector for 69 years. I'll be 70 next year if I make it. And I blame my grandmother for this hobby because she was a pack rat. I don't know how many of you have a collector in the family. My wife always says that we could only have one collector in a family. And I think after we have somewhere between 1.5 million and 2 million items now. So I think she'd like to revise that. The one may be too many. Anyway, I've enjoyed the visits I've had with the people that I've collected. Enjoyed the Gertrude Bell time here. I didn't know about her. I think I've read her name, but I do have letters of Lawrence of Arabia and Winston Churchill in the collection, among other things. I brought some things, mostly of our country, here today, and I hope they'll be of interest. Like I say, it was after I remember my grandfather saying he sure wish he could pull his car in the garage. Well, home was taken and moved to Linden many years ago, put on a new foundation. And after he passed away, we'd been living, my mother was the youngest of 6 children. We were living in the home. We moved upstairs after he died. But I remember Grandpa never had the pop, as we call him, never had the heart to get rid of her things. But after he died in 56, the family just took everything out back and built a bonfire and started throwing everything in. I was only 7, and I remember watching this thinking, nobody's even looking at this stuff. It was sad, and I asked my mother later. I can remember that thought. I can remember seeing Pop's false teeth in the ashes, and I can remember 2 uncles fighting over a pair of socks. That's all I can remember from that day. But I asked my mother later, did you save any of Nana's things? And she says, yeah, there was one box that was up in the rafters. And I had your dad go get it before we moved. Del Ashworth was an architect here. And he built a home on the East Bench before the old temple was built many years before. And I pestered her till we found the box. She says, no, you can probably just have it. You can just have it. It's just probably junk. And I found 12 letters of Heber J. Grant in that box, written to Grandma between 1931 and 33. And a bunch of letters of Louise Y. Robinson, if you remember, General President of the Relief Society during that time, who became a dear friend of hers. I'm glad those got saved, but those are what really got me collecting. And I thought after reading the letters, they were all about keeping a son on a mission. And President Grant had taken time to dictate long letters. Some of them were 2 or 3 pages long, single space typed up, probably by Bertha Ivy, his secretary. Beautiful flourished signature. And they're all about keeping a son on a mission during the Depression. And he was encouraging the family to do that, even without Persian script. I asked my uncle before he died, he'd served 11 years as a bishop in Las Vegas later, if he was ever without money on his mission. He says, yeah, it was about 2 or 3 months. They couldn't send me anything. I said, what was that like? He says, that was the best part of my mission. We lived off the fat of the land. And he told me how these good people of Texas took care of these struggling, mostly Utah and Idaho boys from the LDS Church at the time. At any rate, those of you that have eaten at Brick Oven Restaurant, the fire in my pop's house was the west parking lot now, Brick Oven. And there's a stump of an old tree that I put up with Pop the day he passed away. But it was just a little fledgling tree at the time. Well, enough about family history, but I started collecting. I thought about President Grant. I knew more about him reading these letters than anything I'd seen in junior Sunday school. Wouldn't it be great if I could start collecting personal items of all the prophets and presidents of the church? And that was the first collection I did, and I've done that about a dozen times. And then I started collecting the Relief Society presidents because Louise Y. Robinson was a friend of my grandmother's. And those are a lot more difficult, as has been mentioned about Martha Washington. I found over the 7 decades of collecting that the women's materials are much rarer than the men's. For every Joseph Smith signature, as rare as they may be, Emma Smith's 10 times rarer. For every Napoleon signature, Josephine's 10 times rarer. For every Washington signature, Martha's probably 20 times rarer, but much rarer. And I come to the conclusion, I hope it doesn't sound sexist, that who keeps this stuff? Usually the women outlive the men. And I don't care if you read their husband's stuff, but you're not reading my letters. So I don't think it was just Martha Washington. I think a lot of people have destroyed letters. Actually, Martha destroyed the letters between her, the love letters between her and George, which historians have never forgiven her for. At his request. He didn't want those letters read. He knew he'd be reading his letters. because he'd helped establish our country. And Jefferson felt much the same way. And so they made it a point not to put any emotion in their own letters after it looked like we'd achieved our victory. One of the greatest letters that I've had is George Washington that I did not bring, but he gives credit to divine providence for winning our liberty and independence in the letter. He's writing to one of his chaplains who had written him right after King George decided not to send us any more Germans to fight the revolution. And he said, your name's going to be known, General, throughout all of our history. They're going to be naming streets and towns and territories and states and even children after you. All that's true, isn't it? And Washington responded, well, I'm grateful for the kind congratulations on the happy event of peace, but I hope in the midst of our joys that we shall not forget that to divine's providence is to be ascribed the glory and the praise. He's telling off his chaplain. If it wasn't for Washington's humility and so on, we never would have won. Washington outran the toughest army, which he'd been part of as a colonel before the war, and he knew the odds. In the world, England ruled the world pretty much then, England and France, sometimes Spain, but he had dealt with all of them before. Well, our time's limited, and I want to share some of the things I brought today. I'm going to walk around a little bit, so maybe I can hold up a few things. I'll start down at this end. Just to show the oldest complete book that I have is this one here. This is not the United States, but it was done at the Sorbonne in Paris in 1225. And have you been to Notre Dame? Okay, this book is as old as Notre Dame. At least Notre Dame was started then. It's all done by hand on vellum. So if you can see this, it's the Bible. And it's all done on vellum. And this guy, you can see why some of these guys lost their eyesight doing these. And the index is the only really colorful thing. There's the index. Okay. So they use the blue and the red and so on.
Is it like to the King James?
No, this is a St. Jerome version, it's a Catholic version of the Bible, but it's in Latin. So I took a little bit of Latin in law school because so many things are in Latin. I just wanted to show you that to show you a little extent of the collection. We're talking about the Pilgrims. Maybe we can get those lights on a little bit more so people can see when I hold them up. You get that one? No, I want more light. All the light, yeah. Let there be light. This is an original port entry manifest for the ship Mayflower. There are 26 ships named Mayflower that we found, but the only one of them had Christopher Jones as the captain. This one was a port entry 10 years before Mayflower brought some of our ancestors to America in 1620. This is 1610, saying a Mayflower under Christopher Jones has brought some cloth and so on into port. So the ship was being used. It was kind of an older ship by the time our ancestors, 102 of them, got aboard. Some of them from the other ship that sprung a leak. There's an Indian deed here, a Pilgrim Indian deed. This is from 1665/66, the way they dated it back then. But it basically is signed by my first American ancestor, John Alden. And he signed his name, John Jon Alden, Alden. Sometimes he would add an age, sometimes he wouldn't, but that was pretty common back then. That was here. It was 20 years. This is 45 years after they landed. So they 60, 65. He was the last of the Pilgrim men to survive. Who survived? One Pilgrim lady outlived him, and was one of the youngest ones. Many say that he was the one that first jumped aboard Plymouth Rock, if that story is true, and anchored the ship. But this is an Indian deed giving Quashata set, the Tatum of the Massachusetts tribe, getting his approval to take pilgrim cattle across their land. We asked for permission years before we took it. Okay. And that's the way it was early on. Yes.
Could you just explain a little bit about the process that you use for finding things? Do you
Well,
go looking for that, or did you just?
Yeah, I was
stumble
looking
across
for,
or-
I've only seen two of these John Alden things come up for auction over the years. I got this at Christie's, New York, about 40 years ago. And I was thrilled to get something of my first ancestor. I've only seen one other. I bet on it, but I didn't have a chance because it went much higher. But here's asking. I took this to school when my kids were little, and Quashanasit and his other chiefs signed with a V. And somebody says, well, why didn't they sign with an X? You know, and I says, well, this is an old document. It was signed before they got to X. I made that up, but the kids seem to buy it. This is a commission signed by Abraham Lincoln, and you can see his signature right down here. And the William Seward, Secretary of State. It has the United States seal on it at the time, which has changed slightly. It's appointing an ambassador to Siam. King Mangat had sent Lincoln a letter, which I was going to quote from, I don't have time, offering when he found it. I don't know how many of you remember The King and I, but you remember when the lady teacher told him, asked him, the king is, what's Lincoln up to, and your president? And says, well, and she was an English lady, but she said, the American president's fighting a civil war. Is he winning? Well, I don't know. It was early on. And I says, well, has he got elephants? And she says, no, I'm sure not. I says, well, he can't win the war without elephants. So he wrote a letter sending 2 elephant tusks to Abe Lincoln and some other things, some sapphires and so on, and offered to send a herd of elephants to the United States to help Lincoln fight the war. Historians have often wondered if Lincoln had ever accepted and there was some way to get him here. How that would have been at, the charge at Gettysburg or some other place using elephants. But Lincoln wrote a very kind letter back to him, which I have a copy of, but I won't read it, just saying how much he appreciates the offer. But he says, I don't know how we get the elephants here, and I don't know how we use them, but thank you for the offer. It was a kind of letter. There's the Bradford Bible is here, as has been mentioned. It's kind of delicate, so I'll be careful with it. But it's signed by William Bradford on the title page. It was published in Leyden, Holland, where they left from in 1601, is the date on the book. They left in 1620. But it's a rare book. I got it at Christie's, New York, in an auction about 1991 or 2. And it was a miracle. It was the frontispiece portrait in the catalog. And I didn't think I stood a chance. So it was one of the little miracles that came to me, but that's how I got it. Washington's wallet is here. He gave this to his nephew. It's engraved around the locket. There's a letter of George Washington here. This is a handwritten letter. I'm going to show it because Washington had the most beautiful penmanship of any of our presidents, bar none. None of them were as good a writer as Washington. And the beautiful penmanship. This is a letter, the second in a day, that he wrote on this day that we're aware of, to Robert Morris, who supplied ships and goods and so on, put his own fortune in jeopardy, ended up in debtor's prison. It was one of the first things Washington had to go congratulate him on winning the peace in prison. And it's one of the first things our founding fathers did is they got rid of debtor's prison, okay? So it continued in England, but it's not here. And one of the other first things they did is print the Bible, because the old King George, it was the King's English, literally. You had to buy Bibles from Cambridge and Oxford. And one of the first things our founding fathers did after signing the Declaration was order Robert Aiken to publish a Bible. It's known as the Bible of the Revolution. It's one of the rarest books in American history. I've only had parts of it, pieces of it, but it is the only Bible that had a congressional resolution ordering by Congress the Bible to be printed in the United States. None other Bible had that. I do have that resolution in a combination. And it's been mentioned, there's a letter of Martha Washington here. She's quite rare. It's a letter to Tobias Lear, who ran Mount Vernon for her after Washington's death. She was ordered by the general to destroy their love letters, and historians have not forgiven her for that. But they found 3 of them. And one of them was found behind a big piece of furniture when they were, restoring Mount Vernon. Very lovey-dovey letter from George to Martha. So it's good that we have at least 2 or 3 that have survived. But that was his order, not hers. She had destroyed some other letters, but of her own that she didn't want read. But Washington didn't want his love letters read. But we have 3 that did survive. There's a letter of Thomas Jefferson up here. And Jefferson had an interesting habit of his signature was quite a bit bigger than the body of the letter, which is all in his hand. So he had a different handwriting for signature. They're hard to see, so I'll just let you look at them when I come up here. But this was a letter written to someone who had admired what he'd done for our country when he was an old man. And Jefferson responded to Sam Osborne, who was a teacher down at the University of Virginia down the hill that he had inspired. My father was an architect. I always said the greatest early architect in America was Jefferson, by far. And we went to Mount Vernon. We loved it. My wife and I have been there. Beautiful place. But he designed the university down below, too, where our son Adam served his mission in Virginia. Anyway, he goes on to say, if in the course of my political term of service, my fellow citizens think I have effected anything useful for our country, my reward is in their approbation, their approval. I am thankful that I've lived to see the sacrifices of the revolutionary generation, whatever they may have been, result in so great a share of happiness to their descendants, and that they, and that's us now, the descendants, may perpetuate and improve these blessings will be my last prayer. So that's Jefferson. I didn't read you the Washington. Let me just read one part of that in a minute here. There is a letter of John Hancock. Incidentally, the Declaration of Independence, long story I won't get into, was not signed until August 2nd. Okay? We know of only 2 men that signed it on July 4th, and the original of that has been lost. You know the original Declaration is lost. We never learned that in school, but it got lost at the printer. And so we don't know if the printer lost it or what. Charles Thompson, the Secretary of Congress, sometimes gets blamed, but he was very fastidious, and I'm sure it wasn't him. Charles Thompson was the permanent Secretary of Congress, and when it came to the congressional record, to put that back in the record book, he didn't have it. So they just published the broadside, which had 2 names on it, Hancock and Charles Thompson, the secretary, who didn't sign the final version. That was the only thing that we know was signed on that day, and it disappeared. And I've told people over the years, go home and look for it. You never know, somebody may have saved it and stuck it in it. And I said, if anybody ever finds the original Declaration of Independence, you can say that you'll be visited by the FBI real soon. You know, it's probably is not going to happen in our lifetime because it hasn't happened yet, but you never know what's going to appear. So the Congress thinking, hey, that's our country's birth certificate. That's not going to do. We've got to have a document. So they got Timothy Matlack, their greatest calligrapher, to write up the document that we see and has by law has been made the original. He started on July 17th, 1776. He didn't finish it till August 2nd. It's a lot of work. He misspelled a couple of words. He made there were a couple of little hyphenated words that he put in there. You can't change vellum. I mean, once you write on it, it's porous, usually calf skin. And anyway, so Hancock put his big Hancock, and this is 8 days later, and his signature is still exactly the same size. I could have brought my copy of the original, which is about this size. Any of you that have seen the original. That's the handwriting of Hancock, whose name is synonymous with signature now. Put your Hancock here. Is the same size as this one. This is a letter to that's making General James Clinton a United States general in our armed forces 8 days after he signed the Declaration. There's John Adams. I love John Adams. He's great. The biggest signature I've seen of a U.S. president while he's president is John Adams. I've got one like that. The tiniest signature I've seen of a U.S. president when he's not president is John Adams, and the one on this letter I'm going to show you is about this size. Ego does show itself in signatures. This is John Adams. It's too tiny for you to see from there. But this letter is kind of fun because he's been accused of not being a Christian. And he responds to that here to Benjamin Rush, his fellow signer of the Declaration of Independence, the great doctor from Philadelphia. And he said, unlike Washington and Jefferson, you know exactly what Adams was thinking. That goes for Sam, his cousin, too. He was the Harry Truman of his day. He wrote exactly what he thought. You know, if he was going to punch somebody in the nose or something, he'd tell you that. Washington and Jefferson were a little uptight about how history would read them. But at any rate, this is January of 1810. Learned, ingenious, benevolent, beneficent old friend of 1774. Thanks for the magazine, The Light and Truth, as I used to call the Aurora, which you sent me. You may descend in a calm, but I have lived in a storm for 50 years and will certainly die in one. That's how he starts his letter, okay? But he ends it with this. The Christian religion, as I understand it, is the brightness of the glory and the express portrait of the character. I've got a little sciatic problem, so I'm going to hang on to this. And the express portrait of the character of the eternal, self-existent, independent, benevolent, all-powerful, and all-merciful creator, preserver, and father of the universe. The first good, first perfect, and first fair. It will last as long as the world. Neither savage nor civilized man, without a revelation, could ever have discovered or invented it. Ask me not then whether I am a Catholic or Protestant, Calvinist or Armenian. As far as they are Christians, I wish to be a fellow disciple with them all. That's pretty direct, isn't it? His beliefs. Well, I was going to quote from Benjamin Franklin, the grandpa of our revolution. His letter is here, a 2-page letter to his sister, Jane. Me and his sister were the 2 youngest of 17 children. Number 16 and number 17. He was the youngest. And we named our youngest son Benjamin, partly from the Book of Mormon character and partly from this great man. I call him the grandpa of our country, okay? And at any rate, he was on business in 1758. This letter is written 20 years almost before, 18 years before the Declaration. He was the most famous American in the world at the time. And famous scientist and so on, inventor and creator and so on. But at any rate, he was writing his sister who stayed in Boston when he went down to seek his fortune in Pennsylvania, Puritan, Pennsylvania. And he was a real free thinker in many ways. And in Boston, they were kind of uptight. And his sister and him had kind of a running gun battle over the years over which is the most important principle of faith, hope, and charity from the Bible. And his sister from Massachusetts, Jane Franklin Meekum, always thought faith is by far the most important. He violently disagreed and said that charity is far more important. So anytime he got an opportunity to dig it in with her, he would do it. And this particular trip to London, he'd been there before, but he was seeking out a little genealogy while I was there too. And he found a book that their grandfather, Benjamin Franklin, who he was named after, had written to their great aunt Jane, his sister, whom Ben's sister Jane was named after. And he says, for the good that's in it and for namesake's sake, I want to just quote from it. He said he likens the religion. He had written an acrostic, where the Jane in Franklin. And his grandfather had written a line in the front of the book to his great aunt. And he said, you're to relating the beliefs of 3 stories of the Christian edifice in this acrostic, likening religion to a building, which for namesake's sake and for the good advice it contains, I like to continue it, to quote it to you. And he did. And then he said, you are to understand that faith is in the ground floor. Hope is up 1 pair of stairs. My dearly beloved Jenny, don't like so much to dwell in these lower rooms. Get as fast as you can into the garret, for in truth, the best room in the house is charity. For my part, I wish the house was turned upside down. It's so difficult when one is fat to go upstairs. And not only so, but I imagine hope and faith may be more firmly built upon charity than charity upon faith and hope. However that be, I think it is better reading to say, raise faith and hope 1 story higher. He then adds one of his couplets, he's famous for throughout the world. A man of words and not of deeds is like a garden full of weeds. And then you'll notice a cross out on the 2nd page. His sister put a little note crossed out saying, this part of the letter not to be read to anybody. He turned the couplet around and he said, I've been misquoted by that a man of deeds and not of words is like a garden full of blank. He said, I forgot the rhyme, but 'tis the opposite of a perfume. So anyway, it's still funny. And Ben Franklin had a wonderful sense of humor. It's interesting, on most of the founding fathers, they signed with abbreviated first names, and then, T.H. Jefferson. John Adams would do it both ways, write it out, or the other way. G.E.O. Washington, P. Henry, many of them abbreviated their first names. I didn't bring a Patrick Henry or Alexander Hamilton, but his was A. Hamilton usually. Anyway, the Washington letter on the 2nd, he had written Robert Morrison, the letter I showed you, and he'd written him earlier in the day, and he'd asked for shirts. Some of his men didn't have shirts, okay? And then later in the day, he says, in a struggle like ours, perplexed with embarrassments, I'm sure not having shirts was one of them. If it should be my fortune to conduct the military helm in such a manner as to merit the approbation of good men and my suffering fellow citizens, it will be the primary happiness of my life, because it is the first and great object of my wishes. That's George Washington. It's interesting to me that so many of these founding fathers were so great in the things that they could write, and and I wonder what will be available to collect in the future, because a lot of our material is not available. I read you the Adams and the Jefferson. They're kind of fun. Anyway, just getting along with it because our time's running out. I want to get to Lincoln and his period. In our collection, we do have an artifact we've got Mary Lincoln's purse that she gave to a friend before she left for Washington in Springfield, Illinois. I didn't bring that today, but artifacts are always fun too when you can nail them down. Anyway, Lincoln was in 1859. He'd served 1 term as a congressman, and he was thinking about maybe throwing his hat in for president. But the first Republican presidential candidate, John C. Fremont, had lost, and he was a Whig, former Whig, who joined the new Republican Party, and I was trying to think of whether he should do that. And he went to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, out of his area, to meet with a friend, Mark DeLahey. And while he was there, the young daughter of DeLahey, who was 7 years old, came up to Lincoln, who had only been a has-been congressman way many years before. See, that would have been about 17 years earlier. And now was thinking of throwing in his hat to run for president in 1859 when he met them. And Mary asked that she sign something in her little autograph album that she had. And at any rate, he wrote this: Dear Mary, with pleasure I write my name in your album. Ere long, some younger man will be more happy to confer his name upon you. He's underlined that. Don't allow it, Mary, until fully assured that he is worthy of the happiness. December 7th, 1859, your friend, A. Lincoln. So a little piece of Lincoln to a young girl. I always think it's neat when a famous person later writes to a child. One of the greatest letters I have, I didn't bring, and that's a letter of General Grant at the height of the Civil War, when he received a letter from a young student saying that his teacher had asked him to write her, and just a young kid, and he asked if he would visit their school in New York. And Grant obviously has his hands full with the war, can't leave, but writes a very kind letter back, 2-page letter to this young man, thanking him for the letter, and please be sure to thank your teacher. And if I ever get time in the future, I'll stop by your school, but I'm kind of tied up right now. And at any rate, he ended up by saying, say hi to your pa and ma and your teacher, and signed it U.S. Grant, Lieutenant General, and it's on Armies of the United States heading on the letter itself. I have a letter of Lincoln that I had in our collection. I've got rid of it years ago to pay off a house. In fact, that's one thing I should tell you is that Lincoln bought both our last 2 homes, and one I had a piece called Bass Backwards, which was a spoonerism he'd written on a slow day in court, which is hilarious, and we put that in my book. I didn't bring the book, but anyway, and it helped pay off our old house, and then the home we're currently in, the letter that I sold to the young cadet at West Point, who was a relative of his wife Mary's cousin, was ready to quit West Point, and one of the worst days of the war. Lincoln didn't have very many good days, but this was a bad one. He'd written McClellan earlier in 1862. It was June 28th, and he said, "Save your army at all costs." That's how this other letter started. This one he writes to the young cadet, and he says, "Stick to your purpose." He says, "I am old. I've never met you, but let me tell you, stick to your purpose, and you'll never regret doing that." And the young cadet did. Imagine getting that from the President of the United States, West Point. And he completed his West Point career. Unfortunately, he died of a disease in the next year, 1866. But he'd stuck with his purpose, like Lincoln has suggested. Well, anyway, one of my favorite people is Mark Twain. I'm a good friend, or have been, with Glen Beck over the years. In fact, he wrote the foreword to my book. But we don't always agree politically. But I think he's a nice person, and I think it's too bad that our Congress can't agree to get the business done, even though they, have disagreements. But Glenn asked me to read this on his program, among some other things I had at Helen Keller and some others. But it's written by Mark Twain. He signs it both S.O. Clemens and Mark Twain, a double signature. And it says, "When the Lord finished the world, he pronounced it good." That's what I said about my first work, too. But time, I tell you, time takes the confidence out of these incautious early opinions. It's more than likely that he thinks about the world now pretty much as I think about The Innocents Abroad, which is his first major book. The fact is, there's probably too much water in both. Anyway, he's cute letter, and Mark Twain, wonderful. My favorite author, a U.S. author, although I've got a lot of favorites. My favorite poet is Emily Dickinson. My wife and I have been to her home. If you haven't been there, that's worthy to go to there in Massachusetts. We were in the last mission we served before the one I'm currently serving was together in Massachusetts. We were in the Boston mission, but we served in Springfield, and that was a wonderful experience. I'm currently serving with Rick Turley on the Joseph Smith book. This is only the second time since Talmadge was asked to write a book that the first presidency asked someone to write a book. So Turley, it probably won't be done when I'm alive, but it's got another 7 years to go. But I was with him Monday. We spent the last 6 months on and off working on this. It's been a fun treat. I'll just share a few more of these things. There's a Frederick Douglass up here. It's kind of nice. This is one of my favorite letters. This is Teddy Roosevelt. And Teddy was our youngest president. You probably knew that. The youngest elected president was Kennedy, but he was a couple months older than Roosevelt when he became president on the death of the assassination of McKinley. And they called him His Excellency because he came in kind of like Harry Truman later, as and others on the death of a president. But he's writing in 1910 on the Outlook magazine, which he did. I love this photo, so I keep it in there. It shows you the enthusiasm of Teddy Roosevelt. These girls had written and said they were not going to get married. We're going to be part of it. He said, I love the short story of married life, and shall show it to Mrs. Roosevelt. Oh, how well I remember our small figures in the little bed next to us, looking steadily over the railing. And if they detected the slightest movement on my part, instantly swarming over with, now, Father, we would like a story. Of course, Mrs. Roosevelt had an infinitely harder time with the children than I had, and did infinitely more. But I am thankful to say that I did do some of the things myself. And whenever Mrs. Roosevelt was away, and I tried to get her off as best I could, whenever I could, I would act as vice mother until her return, and be at the children's tea and tell them stories, etc., etc. Then if there was sickness in the house, I would try to take my share of the work. And he's handwritten, although Mrs. Roosevelt did infinitely more. And especially when we had to divide between ourselves the superintendents of the convalescence of those children who had not yet come down with measles or whatever it was. I still remember vividly one morning when the whole family was in various stages of measles. And while the long-suffering mother was trying to get some much-needed sleep, I lay down on the sofa beside Ted's bed. This is his son that would later get the Medal of Honor for leading our troops at Utah Beach in World War II. I would lay down on the sofa beside Ted's bed in what was the improvised nursery for the two children who were getting better. Having, as I felt, won the right to repose by a story, I said, now, Ted, Father's told you a story, and he thinks he would like to go to sleep for a little while. To which Ted cordially responded, all right, and Ted will play the organ, which he proceeded to do at a distance of 2 feet from my head, with the evident feeling that he was showing virtuous self-abnegation. How sincerely I pity such clever girls as the writers whom you quote. In every kind of life, the greatest happiness only comes where there is a chance for great unhappiness. But how sincerely I despise the cold or timid or selfish souls who dare not try the great adventure, unquote, because it is given to no human being to be certain of joy and not of sorrow. That's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah. At any rate, there's a letter here from FDR that he wrote 3 days after Pearl Harbor on December 10th, turning down the opportunity to speak at the 250th anniversary of the Bill of Rights, okay, because this is the day Hitler declared war, December 10th of 41. I'm delighted to know that you're holding a luncheon in New York to celebrate the sesquicentennial of the Bill of Rights, 150 years, I guess. There never was a time when the real inner meaning of the Bill of Rights was more manifestly clear to all Americans and to all human beings than now. It is precisely for the preservation of the rights guaranteed by the first 10 amendments to the Constitution that we are now compelled to fight. No clearer or more eloquent statement of our cause was ever written than is embodied in the American Bill of Rights. And so that's the letter he did, turning down the opportunity to go speak. There's a letter from Harry Truman, my favorite president of my lifetime. He's president when I was born. And I've never considered myself a Democrat. I'd vote for Harry in a heartbeat. Anyway, I don't think politics means much anymore. But he was asked to write down his prayer. Did you know when he was in high school, Harry wrote a prayer? And he repeated it every morning for the rest of his life. He wrote this in high school. And he was asked by a friend in 1950 to write it out. Oh, almighty and everlasting God, creator of heaven and earth and the universe, help me to be, to think, to act what is right because it is right. Make me truthful, honest, and honorable in all things. Make me intellectually honest for the sake of right and honor, and without thought of reward to me. Give me the ability to be charitable, forgiving, and patient with my fellow men. Help me to understand their motives and their shortcomings, even as thou understandest mine. Amen, amen, amen. Repeated that every day of his life. Well, there's a letter of John F. Kennedy to the Pope, John the 23rd, saying first Catholic president. I guess Biden was the second one, what I understand. But at any rate, the first Catholic president writing to the Pope, saying, asking when he can come visit him. This letter was never sent because the Pope died a week later, John the 23rd. And he later met Pope Paul VI. But the letter was never sent, but he signed it. And I bought this from Evelyn Lincoln, his private secretary. And just says, we'll come when you want us to. We worry about your health and so on. But because he passed away, it was never sent. But more intriguing is a letter from his widow, Jackie Kennedy. And there's an Einstein letter. There's this went to the moon, this flag, with Apollo 11, signed by the 3 astronauts. I brought a Joseph Smith and a Brigham Young. This Brigham Young is the only letter we know that he wrote on the Vanguard Company to Utah, so it's worth reading. But our time's up. There's an Einstein letter here. I just want to end with the Jackie Kennedy letter, because it was written, this was written to his eminence, the Richard Cardinal Cushing of Boston, who had married the Kennedys back in 1953 and became her spiritual advisor throughout her life. This is written after the assassination. This was March 25th, 1969. And she talks about some nice medals that he'd given her and some other things. She just learned that he's in the hospital. He passed away a year later. He says, your beautiful words about the children and so on. And my daughter will strive all her life to live up to those words. The devotion you give to such little things, the lives of children, that is what touches me so deeply about you, that it causes pain that you're in pain now. And she says, any rate, she says, when I sense such sadness between the lines of your letter, I want to give you something. I know of no human comfort can mean anything to you compared to the comfort which God can give you. But maybe if you know that another human senses your suffering and longs to share it and take it on their hearts to spare yours, maybe it'll be nice for you to know that once in your life, because all your life was taking the pain away from others. Anyway, she goes on to say that I've probably taken enough time without reading it all, that she was so mad at God for taking John. And she said, it was you that brought me back to him. And for that, I'll always be grateful. Well, I've had hundreds of copies, probably 200 copies of the first edition over the years. I've traded a lot of them off. There, we know about 500-600 copies around. This is a fake up here. It's a very good one. This is a real one here, and I don't mind people handling the fake. It looks authentic, but this is an authentic Book of Mormon. This was Frederick G. Williams' copy, if you remember him. First, second counselor clerk to Joseph Smith. And the thing that's neat about this copy, and the reason I kept it, is that it has 200 pages of notes written by Frederick G. Williams and Joseph Smith in it. And we think it was used at the School of the Prophets in Kirtland. But we also know now that Frederick G. Williams took this on his first mission. He joined the Indian mission, the first mission of the church. It was a fine, and this was his copy. And Professor Frederick G. Williams, the direct descendant of Frederick G. Williams, has written a long essay for BYU Studies that hasn't been published yet about all of the 200 different things that they were studying when the book first came out, as they were teaching the Native American tribes in on the First Mission, and then later at the School of the Prophets. So that's what that is. But at any rate, I just want to say, as our time shot, that I've enjoyed this. We just barely kind of touched the surface, but you kind of get the idea. I didn't read you the Thomas Edison over here. It's a 4-page on lab paper written to his wife who had left him with their 2 kids because he never came home. He was always working. I don't know if you knew this, but Edison only took one holiday off in the year. He's just too busy to take it. But when he took the holiday off, he really went to, first class. And that was July 4th. And he'd take his kids out, and he knew how to build explosives. And they would set these explosives off, and the cops in New Jersey would follow Edison around every 4th of July. Make sure he didn't blow up something significant. Okay. But this is on lab paper. He's written a nice letter to his wife begging her to come home with the 2 important manufacturers of your creation, the 2 children, the way he describes them. And he says, I'll get off a little time. He says, I'm working every night on the new bulbs, and on the what was it? His well, a couple other inventions he mentions, dynamite, a couple other things. And he says, I'll get off sometime in the spring to take you someplace, but right now I'm busy. And but he's begging her to come back. Okay. And he's got a housemaid, Gertrude, is fine, but she didn't take the place of my wife and our kids. So come home as soon as you can. Anyway, so great men, great women. They have their struggles too. I've read you. I think the Jackie Kennedy learns a great one, and Edison's a great one. But each one of them represents something that is kind of neat about people surviving and overcoming. Let's face it, life is tough. Okay. I don't know how many of you have an easy life, but I don't know anybody that would say they had an easy life. And to me, this gives me assurance that we can get through the things that are thrown in our path too. We've had some tough things in our family, and I know every family has. But at any rate, I'm grateful for the blessings we had. We were grateful for 9 wonderful children, 19 beautiful grandchildren. My sweet wife is sitting here. And, she's the angel in my life. So thank you.
Brent,
Thanks.
would you be willing to share, but let everybody know the address of your famed museum? While you were talking, I had to do a little lookup, and there's a wonderful article from the Salt Lake Tribune extolling the virtues of Brent Ashworth.
Well, that's kind of you. I appreciate that.
But if you would let everybody know how they could, where it's located, how they
Yeah,
could maybe
it's
get a chance to go
If any of you
view
remember,
what you've got.
sure. If any of you remember where Alan's photo used to be in Provo, it's just on University Avenue. My shop, the door to my shop is just 65 North University. It's just directly across from where Alan's was. It's across the street from where Wells Fargo Bank is, in the corner. And it's 65. Go through the door for 65, you'll see signs that take you all the way to the basement. And I'm in the underground, they call it. There's the social now, which is across from me. I was by my lonesome for a few years, but now we got a shop down at the store that keeps it going all night, it seems like. But I leave there by 6:30 or so every night. It's by appointment only because it's so tiny. Okay. And that's all. I just ask you to call ahead of time. My phone number is 801-368-6001. If you call ahead of time, we could take maybe 5 or so people in there, but it gets more crowded with the junk I keep bringing in. What's that? Yeah. Thank you.
Say the phone number again, Morgan.
Okay. Yeah, it's 801-368-6001. And if you'll call ahead of time, you can make sure I'm there. I'm obviously working in 11 storage units too right now. So, which sounds terrible, but it used to be over 20. So we're getting down there. know if I'll live long enough to clean my wall out, but we're getting there. We're donating to, we've given the church over the years. I did 2 missions of the church archives and the church history library. And we donated 140,000 items to them. That's all they ever asked me to do. It's like, Rick Turley, bring your stuff up, Brent. And so that's what we do. We talked to, on Monday, he told me as I was leaving, he says, I really think the Lord kept you around all these years, because I missed a Hoffman bomb, some of you know, all of these years to complete this mission, Joseph Smith, because I've collected stuff on the prophet my whole life. Anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Both okay. Thank you very much, Brent, for a very interesting presentation. We really appreciate you being here. Julie has her hands wonderfully full, so I said that I would bring this to a close for her. We appreciate you being here. Thank you for being here with us all so shiny. We appreciate you. We've been good friends for a number of years and Zumba friends. And if I can get my knee taken care of one of these days, I'll be back. Okay. And thank you all for coming. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 10 o'clock with Brad Daw. Considering the elections were just held, it probably will be a very interesting morning with Brad tomorrow. In the meantime, have a great afternoon.